Welcome back to Rising. Breaking news, a big win for Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis.
Judge Scott McAfee ruled Friday morning that District Attorney Fani Willis's relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade did not amount to a conflict of interest, and she can stay on the criminal case against former President Donald Trump. But Wade has to go.
In the 23-page ruling, Judge McAfee wrote, quote, "The court finds the allegations and evidence legally insufficient to support a finding of an actual conflict of interest. However, the appearance of impropriety remains and must be handled." The judge also questioned the truthfulness of Willis and Wade's testimony about the timing of their relationship. Willis hired Wade to lead a team to investigate and prosecute Trump and others for election interference during the 2020 presidential election. So impropriety and may have lied kind of sound like understatements to be honest. But this is interesting because I wonder what Fani Willis is going to do. Does she just fire Nathan Wade and continue on with the case? I've seen some Democrats suggest that she should just step aside altogether just to put this whole saga behind the case with election interference in Georgia. But I guess it's a partial win for Fani Willis, but I don't know if I'd say that it's like a full-out victory.
I definitely say it's a partial win. This turned out to be like the next iteration of Real Housewives of Atlanta in the most unfortunate situation you could possibly imagine. It's salacious. It is what it is. We all watched the hearing, and there were some uncomfortable moments where I think everybody that was watching, several memes and other things came off of it that were unfortunate. But the case here is that Fani Willis was never on trial. Donald Trump does have a trial coming up. Fani Willis's illicit relationship, whether it happened, the timing of it happening, those are all questions I think were worthy of consideration, considering how strong this case happens to be. I think that Nathan Wade should have never been on this case to begin with.
Right.
And I say that because, one, he has very little criminal experience. It wouldn't have made sense. On top of that, this, I think, is the only logical conclusion that could have happened. He needed to go. And even without the semblance of impropriety that just happens to be here and stinks up the room, even if none of that existed, the fact that he did not have the experience to handle this level of a case was enough to say, hey, we need to choose somebody else for that seat, not him. And we're going to be talking about this for a long time. I don't think that sometimes the semblance of impropriety is worse than the impropriety. So I don't think that that's going to go away. And this case is not going to go away. We want to ensure that that memory is still there. Fani Willis was never on trial. And the fact that she had a relationship and the calendar of events around that relationship and cabins and a whole bunch of other stuff that was weird that came out of those conversations, it doesn't change the fact that former President Trump is literally on a call trying to get the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to find thousands of votes that don't exist to help him to win this election. He's seen pressuring. He led a campaign against poll workers in the state. It's very unfortunate that any of this happened. However, those are the facts of the case that they need to pursue. Fani Willis's personal relationship, it is what it is. There wasn't anything found that would have restricted her from pursuing this case, and the case has been settled there.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that she's not being removed as well, just based on some of the, to be generous, untruths that she might have told to the court while she was doing this testimony to determine whether or not she needed to step aside for this impropriety and this ethical issue, because she repeatedly claimed that the relationship started after she hired Nathan Wade to the office, which to me was a big sticking point, because she had friends saying that they were certain that they started dating in 2019. You had the geolocation data from Nathan Wade's cell phone around her apartment at all hours of the night. And to me, that's a fundamental problem, because when you're prosecuting someone else for perjury, because some of those RICO defendants have been charged with lying and perjury, to then have the same charge levied against you when you're sitting in front of this courtroom and making obvious false statements, where is your credibility to be able to bring this case against those individuals?
Well, I think to the point of the woman who testified that the relationship started at a different time, this is also someone who had been fired from the office for her own issues. And I think that at any given point when someone has been let go from a job, the belief that they are going to give the most glowing report of anything and that be factual, and she wasn't able to present evidence pointing to the contrary, I think would be a very hard thing. It just just seemed like she had axe to grind. The geo-tracking is interesting for me as somebody who has visited Atlanta one too many times, has family there as well. It places Nathan Wade in a vicinity that has a lot of activity going on in terms of bars, clubs, restaurants, and other things. So that to me didn't say, okay, well, he was at this woman's house. Atlanta is not one of the largest cities in America. So at the end of the day, if you frequent certain areas and you have a friend group that also lives among or hangs out in those areas, it's not surprising that you would also have a geo-tracking in that area. It does not necessarily point to, okay, well, this is where he was at this address, as much as it does, hey, it was this neighborhood. There are a lot of people who hang out in that neighborhood.
Yeah, it doesn't track for me that this woman had an axe to grind, though, because Fani Willis testified to the fact that they had renewed their friendship in recent years and that they were actually quite close. And then you also had this issue with Nathan Wade's partner at his law firm also telling the Trump defense attorney that they had started their relationship also in 2019. Then when he got on the stand, he started to equivocate and give some weird testimony, claiming that he was just speculating. I mean, all of it is very strange. I think it all points to the same thing, which is that more likely than not, they were having this relationship before she hired him. And then there was the fact that she tacitly admitted to campaign finance violations while she was on the stand, right? Because she was asked where she got the cash to pay back Nathan Wade, because conveniently she reimbursed him for all of these trips and thousands of dollars of cash that she had lying around. And her response was, well, I might have got it from my campaign and held on to it, which is illegal. Obviously, when you have campaign funds left over from a race, you either have to donate them to the party, you have to donate them to a charity, or you can save them for a future campaign. You can't use them to reimburse your boyfriend for trips.
Georgia has a very high bar when it comes to being able to prove these things. And I think that for lack of evidence in the majority of claims that were lauded against Fani Willis, that's why this fell the way it did. I do think, however, when it comes to campaign finance, we might not have heard the end of that one. This case in and of itself does not eradicate the state from further investigation into campaign finance, which may come up later. Again, that's not going to stop the ongoing trial for former President Trump. That's an entirely separate situation. However, I do think you bring up a very good point, because there could be in the coming months the state look at Fani Willis more intrinsically when it comes to campaign finance regulations, and then again, that would be a separate situation, but that could, unravel a whole lot of things that didn't necessarily come up during this hearing.
Yeah, I definitely don't think this is the end of things for Fani Willis. I mean, in addition to her testimony here on the relationship and the fact that she's now going to have to fire Nathan Wade, plus the potential campaign finance violations, she's also facing these whistleblower complaints in her office, where there are individuals who claim that she and members of her office were improperly accepting federal grant money and then misusing it for things that they were not supposed to spend it on, things it was not earmarked for. And then, according to some of the audio recordings we've heard, that the employees in the office brought these concerns to Fani Willis, and she acknowledged that they were real, but kind of dismissed them, and then conveniently fired the whistleblowers a month or so later. So I imagine that's going to continue to be investigated as well. And with all of this piling up, it just seems very unlikely that at the end of the day, she's going to remain the DA of Fulton County with all of this air of impropriety surrounding her. Because, I mean, to your point, whether or not you think the allegations against Trump are true, whether or not you think this case is going to come down on his side or against his side, it's a distraction from the process. And that's the fundamental problem here, is if you're going to bring this massive RICO case where you accuse a former president of trying to steal an election, you better have all of your ducks in a row. Your stuff better be in order. And clearly it was not.
Yeah, I think on a personal level, her stuff wasn't. When it comes to this case, though, I think that it's still very important to separate those things. Fani Willis has tried hundreds of RICO cases, and then the overwhelming majority has gotten convictions. You also have a case in which, this one in particular, where people who are aligned with the Trump campaign flipped in order to ensure that they didn't serve an extreme amount of time in prison themselves. The save yourself rallying cry when legal proceedings start is nothing new to anyone. But I do think that, again, we have to create the separation here. Fani Willis's, whatever's going on in her office, which I do think there are some legitimate questions around, not only whistleblowers, but other things that are going on in her office, is entirely separate from the case involving former President Trump.
All right, we're going to be back with more Rising after this.